you did a talk at Black Hat, and I think it was called Purple Hat Teaming in MITRE or something like that. Does that sound, is that right? Did I get it right?
Yeah, the title was Picky Purple Teamers Pick MITRE Attack.
And so that's exactly what you're talking about, right there. I mean, it's very similar, like purple teams being on the offensive, looking for those vulnerabilities or looking for those threats before they happen.
Yeah, I'm very much a purple teamer, and I have been for a very long time. In particular, because even though my core focus is on digital forensics and incident response, people understand that I've done defensive security. Really, that goes back to my sysadmin days. That's almost a given that you have some level of defensive security skills. People also kind of get the digital forensicness and incident response side. What's a little less apparent, though, is the offensive security stuff. And the reason I spend time learning offensive security and experimenting and labbing up things and working through them is because when you understand the tactics, and that really gets to MITRE ATT&CK, that will tell you the tactics that anybody doing offensive security, whether they're a malicious threat actor or a legitimate penetration tester or red teamer, everybody's using those particular techniques to try to exploit an environment. And so what I think understanding offensive security does for people that do incident response is you understand what the attacks are, you understand how they work, you understand the tools that are used, how those tools work. If you go to the next level, you start to understand some of the digital forensic artifacts that those tools will leave behind.
Absolutely. Well, and I was going to say, and then you start tying that into MITRE, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And really, there's MITRE's got more than just the attack framework. That's the one that gets a lot of focus, but they also have the defend framework as well. That tends to be a little more philosophical, a little more generalized, if you will, than say attack, which is gets really, if you drill deep enough, you start getting into very specific. For example, persistence in Windows. You might have scheduled tasks as a vector. In Linux, you have cron and those sort of things. But I think really to be effective in what you do, it's helpful to be able to think like an attacker, even if you're on the defensive side, even if you're on the forensic side, because that starts giving you ideas of what to look at.
Right. Well, and I think that's kind of cool too, because that's the evolution, right, of the SOC that we're talking about, to see these teams going incident response specifically, right? Used to be just a defensive and responsive team, but now they're starting to be more proactive. So they're starting to do some more of that threat hunting type functionality. And then we've got cyber defense now that is defending and doing a little bit more proactiveness too. It's just interesting to see how the whole SOC has morphed. And the roles, right? The roles and responsibility of the people in the SOC and security operations. Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. And, it's definitely, things change and you have to adapt with how those things are changing and happening. It's interesting because a lot of things that are steeped into, what we deal with now, they sort of have the roots back into olden times. And we were talking earlier about some of the talks I've given. One of them is a talk called Lies, Telephony, and Hacking History. And some of the things I talk about are relatable to now. So, for example, recording tones and playing them back using a tape recorder. We didn't call those things replay attacks back then, but that's essentially what they were. And nowadays, when we think of replay attacks, we think of things like cookie files, we think of packets, those sort of things. But those things have their, an interesting history. And port scanning is just sort of next level, modern version of, the old war dialing, trying to find modems listening on phone lines.